Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Law Talk Friday. This is the Civil Matters and Criminal Justice Unit bringing this presentation to you. Before we get started, I just want to let everyone know that this presentation is intended to serve as legal information and does not replace legal advice. If you have any legal questions or in need of legal advice, make sure you contact Lone Star Legal Aid at 1-800-733-8394 or go to www.lonestarlegal.org for more information on legal assistance. My name is Fallon Hamilton, and I am one of the staff attorneys with the Civil Matters and Criminal Justice Unit. Today, I am being joined by two of my colleagues, Mr. Ethan Bishop-Watt, as well as Mariah Gorham, and we are going to be joined by a very special guest. For those not familiar with the Civil Matters and Criminal Justice Unit, we are the special unit in Lone Star Legal Aid that has the ability to kind of practice quasi-criminal law, anything that's governed by a civil matter, which is falling under the realm of record clearing, occupational licenses, some misdemeanor C cases, and a kind of hodgepodge of other things. We are the attorneys who are able to bring that type of work to our client population. So today we're going to be joined by Mr. Noah Rattler. Noah is a Houstonian who advocates for homelessness in the Houston area. In the past, he has literally walked on his feet from Houston to California to raise awareness about homelessness. During that time, he walked about 20 miles a day where he nearly stepped on rattlesnakes, burned his feet on 120-degree plus pavement, and was also almost hit by an exploding semi-automatic truck during his journey. He'll have to tell us about that, but he literally walked on feet. While he was walking, he carried a sign that says, "I am walking for the homeless." Before he took that walk across the country, he obtained his Bachelor's of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering and Physics at Prairie View A&M University. Since he took that 1,800-mile walk, he also spearheaded the Houston Sleep Out, where individuals sleep outside in solidarity with those who are unhoused. In addition to doing all of these things, Mr. Rattler also co-authored a children's book called Noah's Walk, aimed at teaching children about serving their communities and how to be advocates specifically for homeless populations that are in need. He will be able to give us a unique perspective that a lot of people, just individuals, wouldn't have, since he's done like so much. So I'm excited. Today, we're going to talk about a new law that is going to be coming into effect on September 1st, and it is going to be affecting that homeless population. So I'm going to pass it over to Mariah, and she is going to let us know that law. We're going to have a little brief discussion about how it's going to affect the changes with the September 1st date, and then we're going to pass it to Ethan, who is going to kind of give a better explanation of what our unit does in return to helping people who may or may not come into contact with this law. And then we're going to get back to Noah on just a conversation on how all of this will affect Houston population of homeless, as well as just like in general in the state. So Mariah, please take it away.
Thank you, Fallon. As Fallon mentioned, my name is Mariah Gorham. I'm going to be screen sharing. Let me let that open. Give me 1 second. Can y'all see this page? All right, perfect. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about House Bill 1925. It's set to be a part of the Penal Code, Chapter 48, Section 48.05, starting in September. So this law is going to make camping in public places in Texas a Class C misdemeanor if the area is not explicitly approved for such activities. The law gives police officers the ability to write tickets to homeless individuals who are camping on the streets or public places. And as Fallon mentioned, it goes into effect September 1st, 2021, so about a week and a half from now. So what is camping? The statute says that any person who temporarily resides in a place with a shelter is considered camping under the statute. And a shelter can be a tent, a sleeping bag, a bedroll, or even a blanket. So using anything designed to protect the person from the weather conditions that could threaten their personal health and safety is committing an offense if the person is intentionally or knowingly residing in a public place under the statute. So if they're using anything to protect themselves. They could be violating the statute if they're not in a designated campsite. So their intent is going to be established aside from having some sort of shelter if the person is cooking, making a fire, storing personal belongings for an extended period, digging, sleeping, or really conducting any activity that would sustain a living accommodation. In essence, if a person is doing anything that would help them survive outside in a public area, it could be considered violating the statute. So before a citation can be issued, though, a police officer is supposed to advise the person of an alternative place where they can lawfully camp and contact an official or nonprofit operating in that area and ask them to provide the person with information regarding the prevention of human trafficking or any other service that would reduce the likelihood of the person continuing to camp. However, a police officer does not have to do this if they determine there's imminent threat to the health and safety of any person involved. So where is an unhoused person going to be allowed to camp then? This new law speaks to designated campsites where homeless individuals would be legally allowed to camp. While Austin, Texas has placed a list where their campsites are going to be, Houston has not yet said where that's going to happen. So at this time, it's unclear where a homeless individual can legally camp in Houston starting September 1st. If a person wants to make an area a designated campsite, they're going to have to apply, and it's going to have to be pre-approved by the state. And those proposed plans are going to have to include things like a description of the local healthcare available, indigent services, reasonable, affordable public transportation, local law enforcement resources, and any steps that the jurisdiction has taken to cooperate with the mental health agency for new campers. However, if a proposal is made for a public park, it's going to be automatically denied because the statute is not going to allow designated campsites to be in public parks. The statute also mentions a little bit about personal belongings. So if a person is going to be arrested or detained solely for the offense of camping, a police officer has to make sure that all the individual's personal property is preserved by either allowing the person to remove all of their property from the public place before the departure, or taking custody of the property and allowing the person to retrieve it after they are released from custody free of charge. The language here in the statute leaves it open for if a citation is given for camping and some other matter, they do not have to keep the person's property free of charge, only if it's solely for the offense of camping. Lastly, the statute does also mention about possible diversion programs. So the statute mentions that it does not prohibit a policy from being implemented that allows a diversion or a provision of services in lieu of citation. So local entities are free to choose to avoid criminalization of unhoused Texans by putting policies in place that could potentially divert them from ever entering the legal system or receiving a citation at all by allowing them to do or accept social services. But at this time, there is no such policy in Houston, although that doesn't mean there won't be. So it is really important for the people of Houston to know about this new law going into effect, because there are possible legal ramifications of receiving a misdemeanor C. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ethan Bishop-Watt, who will discuss misdemeanor Cs in more detail.
Thank you, Mariah. I think we're trying to figure out how to get me back on the screen, but in the meantime,
she'll just have to unshare her screen.
Oh yeah, okay. If you can unshare your screen, Mariah. Yes, so I'm going to talk a little bit about misdemeanor Cs and how this new camping ban fits into that system. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about Lone Star Legal Aid and the work that we do and hope to do in the future. So misdemeanor C cases are cases where the only possible penalty is a fine up to $500. And because of a Supreme Court case way back, you are not entitled to an attorney in cases where there is only a risk of a fine. And so the big issue that we see in misdemeanor C cases are that because the accused aren't entitled to an attorney, they're going into the system blind, and they're not always getting treated fairly or don't always know their rights. And as a result, are often not getting the best outcome for themselves, and worse, are often getting saddled with long-term, or in some circumstances, even lifelong consequences of an offense where legally they were only supposed to face a fine of up to $500 and never had an attorney. And the most common misdemeanor Cs that most people encounter, that we encounter, are traffic offenses. And so, things like driving without a license or driving without insurance, or, most speeding offenses, things like that. Those are misdemeanor C offenses in the code. And like I said, you're not entitled to an attorney. The issue with things like that, especially the ones that face our client community, is that because our clients are low income, they have full-time jobs, often multiple jobs, or they are on some kind of disability because they're unable to work. Their ability to travel is often limited, and so they're given this citation, and they aren't able to make it to court for one reason or another, and they don't contact the court for one reason or another. And if they don't appear at a number of hearings, the court can charge them with an additional offense of failure to appear. It's a totally separate crime, has its own fine of up to $500. And issue a warrant for that person's arrest. And so, this is how you can be arrested and spend even a small amount of time, but still spend some time in jail, or at the very least detained, for the purpose of seeing a judge, even though you never had an attorney. And I think the reason that the camping ban, I think, poses a heightened risk of these failure to appear arrests, because we don't know how it's going to play out. It hasn't taken effect. Law enforcement agencies aren't making public announcements of how they're going to enforce it. But there's a high risk if an officer stops somebody who is camping and gives them a ticket because they are, ostensibly homeless, or, likely lack transportation, or will have a very difficult time getting to the court. They're going to eventually get saddled with a failure to appear. The court isn't that, like, they're not going to have a reliable permanent address where the court can send new notices of new hearings. And so eventually a lot of these people could end up with warrants for failure to appear, and could end up getting arrested. And Mariah talked a little bit about the requirements for, of the officer taking possession of the personal belongings, but we also don't know how that's going to be handled. And we're unclear if they're being arrested pursuant to the failure to appear. The failure to appear statute does not have all of the same requirements for caring for an arrested person's property that the camping ban does. And so we don't know if an officer is arresting someone on a failure to appear warrant. Well, are they going to be bound by the same requirement to help the person gather their things and keep it in a safe place for them? We don't know. And so that's one of the major concerns about this camping ban is these, a lot of these people by definition don't have a home, don't have a mailing address. A lot of them aren't going to have valid IDs, whether they're driver's licenses or state issued IDs. A lot of them aren't going to have their social security cards if they have a social security card at all. We don't know what the officers are going to be trained to do in terms of taking down the information for a detained person, the necessary information to fill out a ticket and give them a citation. There are a lot of potential issues there. And there's additional concern that if somebody who is stopped for violating this camping ban, if they're not able to comply with all of the things that the officer asks of them or provide all of the information that the officer needs from them, that by itself could result in arrest. And so I think there is some amount of hope that in some places that won't be a significant issue, but because every law enforcement department throughout the state gets to decide how they enforce this law. And so we're going to see a wide variety of methods of enforcement, a wide variety of consequences as a result throughout the entire state, which makes it difficult for nonprofit attorneys like those in CMCJ and those in other organizations like us throughout the state, because it's unpredictable and it will almost certainly be, widely different. It makes it difficult for us to collaborate and, for us to coordinate a strong and unified front, because we're all going to be facing different problems with that. And so sort of transitioning into what Lone Star Legal Aid does, as Fallon said, we do record restriction, expunctions and non-disclosures. We can do some misdemeanor C cases, and we can, help with some other issues such as driver's license restoration and stuff like that. And so we we hope and plan to be a resource for people who are cited for camping when they're not so, in a non-designated area. And so our hope is to be able to work with at least some, hopefully many, of those cited people. And whether it's providing them legal advice or providing them legal representation, it is our hope and our plan to provide services to those people, because the camping ban is a misdemeanor C, at least right now, it's going to be a misdemeanor C. It's within the purview of what Lone Star Legal Aid does. And so we can handle cases that come to us in a variety of statuses. We can handle cases that haven't gone to court yet. We can handle cases that have gone to court but have gone awry following a conviction of some kind. We can handle somebody's criminal records, following, the completion of a case in which they were convicted. There are, like Fallon said, a wide variety of services that we can provide. And we specifically want it to be known to as many people as possible so that it can be disseminated to our homeless population as widely as possible, what this camping ban is, what it's going to mean for those individuals, and the services that may be available for them if they are ever cited, detained, arrested for these offenses.
Thank you so much, Ethan. Noah, I know we just probably threw a lot at you, but you are our official boots on the ground advocate who can kind of shed some light on what's going on in those actual populations and in that community. Before I even get into any of your accomplishments and all of the things that you have done to kind of help serve this homeless or unhoused population in the Houston area, what is your first thought when you hear about a camping ban coming into effect in the Houston area, Texas overall on September 1st? What is your first thought when you hear that, just knowing how the population has everything they've been going through, like we're in a pandemic, all these things are going on. Houston is a big metropolis, like concrete jungle, all those great things. What's the first thing that's popping into Noah Rattler's mind when you hear about this new law coming into effect?
I think it's legislation, not necessarily for effect, but for just to say that we've done something. I think they wrote that law just to say that they're doing something in whatever, and during the legislative session. It sounds very scattered, and there are cities like Dallas has been, for years, it's been illegal to camp. And it's done nothing for the homeless population. They haven't gotten larger or smaller based on that those legalities. It's not going to do anything to fix or make homelessness disappear. I feel like it's just people are doing something just to say that they did something. Functionally, it's super impractical to arrest everyone who's homeless. There's nowhere to put them. If an officer has to give them a space that they can go to, like, before I give you this ticket, before I give you this ticket, arrest you or make you move, I have to send you to a place. I have to give you some options. If there aren't any options, it's like, it's too many if-thens in that legislation. It sounds like it's useless, but people have to sound like they're doing something. And so this legislative session, with everything that's going on, I guess was it passed during this session or was it last session? Are y'all familiar? I wasn't clear about that.
It would have been passed
in the previous.
Yeah, so it's going into effect this upcoming September.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It sounds very symbolic, more symbolic than anything. It doesn't sound like it has a real effect. The effect that it's going to have is when officers, with their large amount of leeway, so if I can, you have to do this, and this before you do anything, unless you feel like health and safety is being threatened. So like that level of discretion, officers can choose to just default say health and safety is threatened, and so then I'm gonna do this, that, and the other. All it's gonna do is like create more of a death spiral for a lot of people who already don't have the resources by default because they're out there on the streets. And so I don't know. It parents told me not to use this word a lot. It sounds kind of stupid. It sounds kind of
yeah. It's okay. We'll go ahead and let you slide with it. I thought you were gonna use another word, so I had to like pause for a second. Like, oh God, what's the word?
There are other ones, but like
yes, okay. So we're good. Yeah, no worries. Stupid is fine. I'll let that roll. So I think a lot of people, even some of us, had our questions when we heard about this new rule. When Ethan told me, I was kind of shocked. Now, I've done some of the things, or like I have knowledge of some of the efforts you've put forth in the Houston community to help the population. But when Ethan told me about the new law, I was kind of like, wait, what? How is this even going to happen? Like, Houston has a very large homeless population, at least from what I see. You know, like, we may not know exactly where everyone is stationed at, but for the most part, I see a lot of people under the freeway. I see a lot of people by under 59. I see a lot of people over there by Minute Maid Park. Where do you think the homeless population now, where are they? Or can you kind of speak on the state of homelessness right now in Houston, and then we'll go into kind of like your advocacy and why you even wanted to raise awareness for this.
Well, this laws like this are really landowners and landlords who want their property value to go up. And so I believe the force behind stuff like this are people pushing to make sure that their property stays clean. It's hard to sell something when you got people camping on your property. That's pretty much where this stuff comes from, because most of the homeless property you never see. Most of the homeless population you never see. You're homeless technically if you don't have your own place, not necessarily if you're staying on the streets. A lot of homeless people are in shelters. They are in relatives or going from couch to couch or living in hotels or living in their cars, and they are actually not under the bridges and in those groups that we see that get all of the kind of, I guess, more charismatic populations of the homeless, the ones who are what we stereotypically believe to be homeless. And so most homeless people you don't see. They're scattered throughout everywhere. Generally, almost half the homeless population, well, often the homeless population has a bunch of children in it. But you don't see a bunch of children hanging out on the 59, up and down on the under all the intersections on the. You don't see children there because they're in different places, and so it's a very diverse group of people, and only a piece is almost like an iceberg. The part that you see is what you. It gets the most attention, but that's not most of the group. And so, but this is aimed at the people that you see, and it's aimed at our concept of what homelessness is, not necessarily the reality of what homelessness is. And so, and it's odd that maybe it's coincidental, I'm not sure, that I believe the eviction moratorium was just extended, but it hadn't really been going on in Texas. People have been being evicted throughout the pandemic, throughout the entire time. So that's one unique thing about the homeless population now. It's become, I'm pretty sure it's being mixed more with people who would not have become homeless, even though most people are very financially vulnerable to it. It just this last year has been so economically turbulent that a lot of people, many more people are more vulnerable to the reality. I mean, more vulnerable to being out on the streets because the economy has really been hit really hard. So, yeah, that's a big part of what's happening now. But this law, I don't know. I don't want to. It's stupid. I just got to go back to it. It's kind of a dumb law, and it's good that you all are around to help mitigate this for people who know that you're there and who may come afoul of it. But right now, I can't even see who would be pushing to do this, because police have their hands full right now with a bunch of stuff. It's not just kids in the hood. It's folk fighting in restaurants on Apple, and the whole world's kind of messed up right now. And so to have this, and when they passed this, couldn't have foreseen the environment that it would go into effect during. But it's a really crazy time for all of this, with the evictions happening, people losing their loved ones, and then I imagine medical bankruptcies and the vulnerabilities due to not just COVID, but the stress of the moment. All of this stuff helping. It's really, there are going to wind up being more people on the streets before this is over with than less people on the streets before this is over with. And throwing something in like this in the middle of it, it's not going to make anything better. It's not going to make anything better.
I think Ethan has a question that he wants to jump in with. I see his face when you said keywords. I'm like, you're hitting right on his areas that he's passionate about. So Ethan, go ahead.
Yeah, well, and so you just spoke at length about the issue of the eviction moratorium. And that's actually something that we've talked about in our unit, and that I've talked about with other attorneys that do the work that we do, about this potential nightmare convergence of these two issues whenever the moratorium ends and there are, actual legal ways to evict people in Texas. I know you've said that people are being evicted anyway, but I mean, we expect a significant uptick in evictions once the moratorium ends. And, then we've got this new camping ban. And so I'm curious, from your experience, you've said that the evictions will lead to more people on the streets. But based on what's happened so far, do you and other advocates have an idea of how many, what proportion of evicted people end up on the streets versus a friend or relative's home or a shelter? Or has there not been enough of those situations to create any data that, that could be predictive or could help us shape our expectations?
I can't answer that, Ethan. My best guess would be it'd be really proportional, because oftentimes people who are, and this is a regular thing throughout the normal world, when there isn't a pandemic, a lot of that population of the homeless, which is much larger than the population that we see that goes from couch to couch, a lot of those people are working poor, and they're borderline. And so they'll go from couch to couch rather than wind up on the street. So in the homeless population, it's generally broken up. You can break it up into two groups. One is the financially vulnerable, and they may be on the streets once, or they may be kind of off and on every now and then, but they are temporary homeless because they are out. They're homeless but less than 6 months at a time. The chronically homeless is the group that you see on the street that is usually homeless for 6 months or more. And that's the group that is usually more visible, but it's the smaller group of the two. Most of the people who are going to go through these evictions are probably not going to wind up out on the streets. A lot of them will go bouncing from friend to friend. But I don't think that's changed from the pandemic, because people, we do look out for each other. The homeless population over the last several decades has grown as the economy changed and people have left home, and we don't live as close to our relatives as we used to. It was easier for, if I have an uncle with schizophrenia, it's everybody taking care of him versus just his mom taking care of him. And so, because we scattered around the country, the support network that has kept people is fractured. And so the system has to replace that. We had a system to replace it, and then it was canceled in the 80s. And so a lot of people wind up on the streets that we see, but that's not, in the interim, people still take care of each other. And so a lot of folk will go to the streets, but a lot of people will go to their cousin's house or their best friend's house, or live in their car until the next they get the next payment comes from the government, the checks they've been sending, those $2,000 checks. If another one of those comes, that'll sustain it. And so it's still up in the air, man. It's up in the air. I'm not really sure what's going to happen with it because it's been extended, thankfully. Got a lot of programs going to help make sure that bump doesn't happen, but it's not guaranteed that it won't. And when it does, it would be good to for groups like you all to be putting it out that you're there to assist people, because folk will need it. And even though it's not, I don't think most of the people wind up I'm pretty sure most people won't wind up downtown, stand on those sidewalks, but they will be in the system. They'll be dialing 211. They'll be going to the churches, trying to figure out where they can get assistance, because there are a lot of people trying to help, even from the government side. So I can't really call it, but I'm looking for a bump too. I even though I don't think it's happened yet, and it may not. It may not.
You kind of, I guess in my brain, where you say the visible or like the charismatic homeless versus the people who make up the larger numbers, I never really, I guess, thought much into that distinction. So you kind of opened up my mind to like, wait, what? Like, okay, I'm not even thinking of these people, or I'm not even like attributing in between apartments or people that are having to sleep with family members or things of that nature. I'm not necessarily considering them. So just with that going on regularly, like this is life 24/7. How do you think the pandemic has kind of affected that same population, or like public safety? That's been something that is a term that's been thrown around everywhere, like public health, public safety. If we're only seeing the people who are on the streets, not the children, not the juveniles, not the people who are in between work, like how do you think public safety and like helping them and all of the bigger overarchingness of just like the problem, how has the problem been amplified during the pandemic?
Well, I mean, it just in the entire system, you got people just coming out, people being pulled off the front line. And so just the people available to help are more vulnerable. This is not, oddly enough, being outside all the time makes you less vulnerable to contracting COVID, because you're in a place where it's just like more airflow. It's a law of physics that if there's more air around you, then it's harder to get the virus from one person to another. Being in a shelter, however, is much more difficult because you have so many people in one spot. And so shelter spacing during COVID is, how do you balance social distancing with sheltering? Now, if it's somebody that people stand outside, they're actually in a safer space because of that. But like people who are in shelters, is like just something that the people who manage those shelters have to think about. Like we used to be able to get so many people in here, and now we can't, because cramming so many people into a smaller space is actually problematic now. And so like, that's part of the math that they have to go through, I'm sure. And I'm sure it's playing this part out. And the fact that, I mean, COVID has not just hurt the homeless people because homeless people are vulnerable. It's hurt the whole system that supports them, because it just it's touching everybody's life. And so the folk who do it, they at work, they're doing the work, and the work's getting done, but the resources are smaller, like donors at this moment in time, because profits have been low for a bunch of organizations. Like I'm sure the donations are low. But then there's government assistance coming out. And so it's a fight. It's a big fight to make sure that, I don't know if the status quo, but like at least the people who are in the game can stay in the game and keep helping the folk who need it. And there's also a fight to make sure that there aren't new people introduced to it. But we're still in the middle of it at the moment. And right now things have, the wells haven't run dry. And so it's kind of a wait and see and be ready for anything new to happen. Yeah, the streets is crazy.
Right. Yes. So just in general, what about in the population you saw of homelessness and people out in the streets, or not even in the streets? What was the thing that sparked your advocacy and just made Noah say, hey, I got to raise awareness for this? Like the people need to know.
Well, for me, when I left South Park back in '96 to go to Prairie View, I was like this young kid, bright-eyed, and I was gonna I wanted to be an astronaut, and I wanted to save the world. that's what I was in it for. Eventually, after about 1,000 years, I finally graduated from Prairie View. And by that time, I had realized that to save the world, you have to figure out what problems, if solved, will have the largest return on investment. And so mental illness was what I thought about. And this is right before I graduated, I decided to where do people who are mentally ill, who don't have resources, where do they wind up? They wind up incarcerated and they wind up being homeless. And so it was easy for me to volunteer with the homeless, and that's what I started doing, just trying to learn about mental illness and how it affects people who don't have any real support. And once I started volunteering, I realized that homelessness is not just mental illness, it's 1,000 other things. Mental illness has an impact in it, and it creates mental illness. A buddy of mine had the idea, he was convinced that homelessness was almost 99% PTSD. And he might be right about that. If you find somebody who's chronically homeless and you go back and keep tracking back into their history, it's probably some trauma that they never got over. But that's how I got to it. And once I realized that it was a whole bunch of different ways that people wound up homeless, and then I could start listening to people's stories, dang, if I had gone through that versus what I've gone through, I could see myself being out here. It's not that far of a stretch once you hear what certain people have gone through and the horrors that people have suffered that have put them out there. And so that's what really got it for me. Thinking that homeless people were just mentally ill to realize that it's not just the mentally ill. I think at that moment in time, the average age of a homeless person in the state of Texas was 12 years old. And so that's women and children. For decades, up until I walked in 2007, for decades up until that time, the last 10, 15 years preceding that, the fastest growing group of homeless people were women and children. And that's when, because the woman leaves the marriage, she takes her children with them. And a lot of that was due to the increase in domestic violence across the society. And so when more children wind up on the street, then the average age of the homeless person goes down to meet that reality. And so I didn't know that. No one really knew that except for people who worked in that world, because we don't know generally about where the homeless people are. We just know what we think homeless people are, which is that group that we see with our eyes. But that's not the reality. And so, and once I knew that, it's man, children with that level of vulnerability, that stuff goes with them. And that's how you create lifelong trauma that creates homelessness and incarceration. And so just things like that. And there was just one day I was volunteering. It was a November night, and this guy was sleeping on sidewalk he had some sweatpants and a whole tattered t-shirt on. He was sleeping on the sidewalk under a sheet, and it had to be 40 degrees, and it was wet outside. It was freezing to my bone. It was just so unreal to see somebody sleeping like that. I was yeah, I gotta do something. I gotta bring some attention. And during that time, I was finishing school, and I wanted to walk to the Grand Canyon. It's something I've been wanting to do for years. Walk I-10 or something like that. And so the idea of walking was in my head, and then really feeling if I could bring some attention to this, to help not only us in Houston do something about homelessness, but as a society, look at this one thing and see reflected in it all of the issues that we deal with. If I could make enough noise, then I could change the conversation, and that might move the ball a little bit. So that's kind of how I got to it. Wanting to save the world, that started off, and then at the end it was let's just look at us right quick. Because you look at homelessness, you see the problems we have with the medical industry. You see the problem we have with the prison industrial complex. You see the problem we have with our foreign policy, because there are a bunch of young kids coming back from deployment who are starting to hit the streets from the war on terror at that time. You see, it's just everything, education, economics, you see all of that stuff when you look at the homeless population. And so my little backhanded way of trying to get everybody to look deeper at that was not just to like get people off the streets, but like to get us to look at this situation in a way that would stop us from letting people get on the street. Because like to end homelessness, you can pull people off the street. That's not going to do it. You have to plug the river off that's filling up the lake.
It makes sense. So in addition to the walk, can you tell us about the sleep out?
Yeah. So by the time I was almost done walking, I somewhere in the desert in Arizona, I was like, man, I gotta do something else. Because the walk was gonna be over with, and I wasn't on CNN yet or Good Morning America, so I knew it wasn't gonna be a bunch of people, that many people to have seen it. And I remember it in Wichita Falls, Texas. These people were like doing a one night without a home thing. I was like, I could do that. Got back home in Houston the next year. Bill White was giving me an award, and one of the OGs from the neighborhood, Miss Jessie Brown, who was like a champion helping us go, she introduced me to Chris Brown, who was like the city controller right now. We got together. He wanted to do something with it, and we got together and put the put the sleep out together. And what the sleep out was an event that was designed to get people to. Of course, we spent one night outside, and you listen to people. We were joined by people who lived in who were homeless, and then we were also joined by people who served the homeless population. And so we put you outside, take you out of your normal environment, and put you in the alien environment, which opens you up to receive information. We have a conversation with people who are homeless, and like that's the hard part. And a conversation with people who worked at organizations that serve the homelessness, and that's the head part. And so you had these multifactorial experience and discussions and conversations. And then at the end of every night, it was in November, at the end of every night, everybody goes to sleep. When it's quiet, it was either raining or it had mosquitoes out. It was like it rained every year, or it was hot and it had mosquitoes, one of the two. Right before everybody goes to sleep, it gets just uncomfortable enough. And I feel like everybody asks themselves this thought in their head: am I going to get up and go home and go to sleep? And that's the moment I wanted. The whole sleep out was about that one moment. Because if you ask yourself that, then you have to think about the people you were just talking to earlier in the night, or the people who are sleeping next to you. Like, they don't have a choice. And so, like, that's the moment we created the sleep out, raised $110,000 for Search Homeless Services, had thousands of people do it over the few years that I did it. But it's all about that one moment to get people to start to think about, okay, I have a choice. A lot of people don't. Let me do something about it. And a lot of people did. Some people did big things, some people did small things, but the goal of it was to really kind of seat that moment in everybody's heart and their mind, just so they'll think differently about it in their decisions throughout the rest of their life.
That's cool. And I know that you are of the thought that advocacy does not have an age limit. So children can be advocates. Anyone can be an advocate. You wrote your book, Noah's Walk, to kind of shed that light on homelessness, but also let little kids know what's going on. Can you tell us about that and show it and let everybody know what's going on with it, and just your thoughts of like advocacy? Like, anybody can be an advocate, like just a word to encourage like children or whoever that has it on them to want to advocate for homelessness.
Oh yeah, so Noah's Walk, a children's book about the journey, or La Caminata de Noah in Spanish, or La Marche de Noah in French. It's available on Amazon. There's the ebook and for all of them, and an audiobook in English on all the audiobook sites. Wrote the book to it just follows the walk. It follows me through the journey. It's told from a teacher's perspective in a classroom. She's talking to her kids about making a difference. And she uses my walk as an example. And so the idea is to really just kind of spark in children the idea that they can get out and make communities better, make their community better. And because they're a part of it, they can do something about it. It doesn't matter how old you are when you start or when you finish. The idea is that if you're motivated to get out and do something, you can educate yourself about it and do some stuff to make it work. And I've seen it with my own eyes before I even asked children to do it. Just knowing about it, I've seen just the idea. Once you put that seed in someone in a little kid's mind, they're being much less encumbered about a bunch of stuff. They often get up and do and try and do something like food fundraisers, food drives, clothing drive. I've seen children do all of this stuff once they have the idea in their mind that they can do it. They already care, like all of us do when we're young. Like the empathy is there. Like, oh, I want to love you. They like children love everybody. Like that's there, and just like telling them you can do something with that, they just like a machine. They oftentimes just start doing something with it. And so, like, I understand that homelessness is like it seems like it's a very small thing, and that it's a very uncomfortable thing to be around and to think about. But if you are a teacher, you're preventing homelessness. If you are a librarian, you're preventing homelessness. If you are a medical doctor or a mentor or a volunteer at organizations in your community, you're helping the situation. Homelessness is not really a thing. It's a side effect of a bunch of things. And so when we get more engaged in making our community better, however we go about doing that, making it better for all of us, that's the stuff that ends homelessness. It's not really about the brass tacks, the functional part of it is about having beds to put people in. But the bigger picture is about us caring for one another enough to not let people to cancel the situations that cause homelessness. And so if you don't feel like going and going down to a shelter and standing on the food line, you don't have to do that. But just think about all of the things that just more than likely the things that you're passionate about. There's someone at the end of that route that may wind up in one of those food lines. And so I'm a big proponent of people getting out and making their communities better however they can. And I think all of it, the more we do, the more engaged that we all are, the better returns we'll see as far as a shrinking of the homeless population. We got to think differently about our entire society in order to really permanently deal with homelessness. We can't just look at the people who are standing there on the street. We have to look at the whole thing. It's a big thing, it's a big issue, but like that's the job. Like being a member of a representative democracy, like that's the job. Like it's our responsibility to make good decisions to manage this entire machine. And when we don't think of the entire machine when we make those decisions, there are loopholes, like there are holes in the system that people fall through. But we have to become more educated about all of it. We have to know how this thing works in order to make good decisions about this thing so we can take care of the people who are in it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Anything that you think we can do, Lone Star, or just getting information out, how would you suggest us to go about that? Just with that population, since everybody may not have Facebook, everybody may not have internet or things of that nature, like what could we do, or anybody? Just a suggestion to kind of get this awareness out, especially with this new law coming into play on September 1st.
Yeah, contact get in with the coalition. for the homeless. And yeah, tie in with them, tie in with the United Way. Just as like in general stuff, but like for you all, tie in with get like really plug in if you haven't plugged in with the coalition, the Harris County Coalition for the Homeless. Like plug in with them, get in with the Beacon, with Search. Let the organization that do the work know that you all are there, so they and their resource centers will be able to direct people to you. Because it's not an easy way to get out and reach the population. It's just not easy. But like when you're tagged in with those organizations who touch a bunch of the population, then like they need the resources. They're always looking. Star of Hope, like they're looking for ways to help the population outside of what they can do. And so like, yeah, definitely tag in, team up with those organizations and at least let them know that you all are there and preparing for this. But in general, for everybody else, like if you really want to get directly in with the homeless population and help put your hands on that and get in on that level, definitely check out A Way Home. It's almost like a philosophy that the Coalition for the Homeless has, that is like really trying to get rid of the redundancies and services offered and like line things up so that people around the city can like, okay, this is what all this happening with the homeless population. These people are working on this part, then I'm gonna go help with this. These people are working on this part, then I'm gonna go help with this. But these people doing this and they need somebody to do data entry, I'm gonna go help with that. All I'm gonna do is show up and put information in the computer for this, that, or the other organization. Like all that stuff is necessary. Start at the Coalition for the Homeless, and they'll work you in. And if you just want to show up and sweat, you can go to St. John's or something like that. Bread of Life, and they'll work you in.
Thank you so much.
Straight up.
So just thank you for everything. Thank you for everything that you've done and what you continue to do. I don't know, Ethan and Mariah, if y'all had any other parting words or questions. We've been talking. We probably could talk about this for hours on end, so we won't waste your time or our own. But we just wanted to thank you so much. And yeah, we're going to do what we can do to kind of be ahead of September 1st and like let people know what role we can play in and just kind of being a relief on something, just advocacy, something, knowledge, whatever. So thank you for joining us. And thank you, everybody. I hope that you have learned something. I feel like I have. You got my mind on all kind of other stuff that I probably wouldn't have even thought about. So thank you, Noah.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Fallon. Thank you for asking me to come on. It's an honor. And I appreciate what you all are doing. And I appreciate y'all to give me a little time to share my little insight, my 2 cents on all you all doing. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. And y'all have a good day.
Do the same.